that's easier.
Okay.
All right, cool. Now I can take over. I am young. This is a picture of me. And I'm going to quickly introduce myself. So I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I've lived there my entire life. I got really into environmental activism and mostly worked with fossil fuel development in the southwestern Pennsylvania area. But then when, as Dennis mentioned, the Beaver Cracker plant, which is a giant petrochemical complex, was being built north of Pittsburgh, I became more interested in plastic. So a petrochemical plant is what turns the fracked natural gas or oil into plastic pellets, which are then melted down and made into different materials. This specific plant is making plastics that are used in single-use items. So these two pictures are from an action that we did, me and a bunch of my friends. So they have a lot of conferences related to this petrochemical plant because of how big it is in Pittsburgh. And so they were having a conference in Pittsburgh at a bar, or they were having a conference and the meetup afterwards was at a bar, which is in public property. So we dressed up like zombies because it was around this time, and tried to show awareness of the future of what we're all going to be living with if we continue to use plastic. So this is a picture of me dressed up like a zombie. I have a straw going through my head, and there's plastic bags. It was just a fun action that I like to use as one of my like intros to petrochemicals. I work for Plan. This is our full team. We work primarily on the student zero waste movement, which is in 42 states across the US, as well as in a couple different countries and 370 campuses. And so we're kind of like an advising system. We offer advice on campaigns or compost initiatives, really whatever you're trying to do at your campus.
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for the intro, Young. So I'm Tiara. I'm from Manila in the Philippines, but I wasn't always from here. I come from a city south of the Philippines in Davao, which is the red circle down there. So in Davao, we have cleaner air, a lot more greens, a lot more mountains. And when I transferred to Manila for university, that's where most of my environmental work started, by creating environmental documentary films at the beginning as a student. And then eventually I joined Break Free from Plastic after graduating. So I am the Plastic Free Campus Coordinator for the Break Free from Plastic movement. Next slide, please, Young. So Break Free from Plastic is a movement composed of groups from all around the world working at different stages of plastic's life cycle. And they've come together to work under the same banner of stopping plastic pollution for good, stopping plastic pollution from the tap, and working with each other at different intervention points of the plastic life cycle. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of our team. We work in all the 5 different regions. A lot of us are from the Philippines, from here in the global south. And this is a picture from one of our staff retreats just this year, just before the lockdown. Can't imagine. Okay, next slide. So yeah, I've been working for Break Free for Plastic since last year, and we've been coordinating the Plastic Free Campus program, where we have organizations like Plan, where Young is working for, and these are organizations that are working with schools, who we've united together to create this one global group or network of organizations and schools who are working together to go plastic free. So this year we're actually refocusing our efforts towards the global south. Next slide. So I think this is me. Uh, so this is a quick view of the plastics life cycle, which we wanted to show. So here you have the extraction phase, where Young was mentioning before. This is where you extract fossil fuels to create into plastic pellets, eventually in refining, and then have them transported to production to be made into the products that we have in our grocery stores and in our homes. Distribution, where they are displayed and marketed for us, and then consumption, where we actually have these products in our homes and we feel the effects, or we don't feel the effects because they're insidious, of plastic in our homes and how they leach into our systems, and up till disposal, where they are dangerously dumped into our grounds, landfill, the ocean, or incinerated.
This one is me. Yeah, and so as Tiara was showing the full life cycle of plastic, we kind of have like two different views going here. I know a lot more about the extraction and the petrochemical side, and Tiara faces a lot of the disposal in the Philippines. And so this is kind of a map that shows you where plastic ends up going, and how that is like so directly tied into like the international dynamics of the world. So you can see that the top plastic exporters, so those are people that are like getting rid of their plastic, are a lot of countries that are what you would consider more developed, or we like to call it like the global north. Um, and the ones that end up importing more of the plastic waste are the countries that are part of the global south. So they end up facing the brunt of this, even though they're not the ones that are making this.
So, for decades and decades, a lot of first world countries, or at least common knowledge, doesn't know that a lot of plastic has been exported to China. And they've had that waste trade agreement for decades and decades up until recently, I think in 2013 or 2014, when China started banning the export of plastics from global north countries to their country. A lot of Chinese businessmen who have been in the recycling industry of plastics or accepting the trash from other nations have started to close down in China and have started to relocate the other poorer countries, such as the Philippines, my country, a lot of Southeast Asian countries. There's Turkey here, Ghana, Ecuador, Senegal, Bangladesh, and Hong Kong. So it's very problematic because these countries don't necessarily have the facilities that China would have for to process these kinds of plastics. So what happens is the dumping just becomes literally dumping and not even like a little bit of recycling, and it just gets it pollutes our cities or our coastal areas more and more. This is also very problematic in terms of data and reports, because Asia is seen or reported as the top polluting country, or like a lot of countries in Asia rather are seen as the top polluting countries, when a lot of the trash that we have don't even come from here. Okay, next slide, please.
Yeah, and so we want this to be an interactive session, because I know a lot of folks get Zoom burnout just from like listening, sitting and listening. So we're gonna do breakout groups now, and we were gonna do like 4 or 5 groups, really whatever is easiest. And I think that I can make them, or no, I'll just let one of you make them.
Yeah.
But cool. And so we're going to pop into groups, and this is the question that we're going to be talking about. And this is kind of how we like to reframe the idea of waste. And so this question is, what communities have historically been treated as disposable? And if you think about the way that the global waste trade happens, that might give you some hints about like where we send our trash tends to be where we like have less respect, or like we don't value their life as much as ours. So this is a question that we'd like for you to talk about as a group, and then we'll come back.
All right, everyone's gonna go in their breakout rooms. All right.
So is everyone here? Are we a breakout group here?
Yes.
That makes sense. Cool. Yeah, so if folks can and are willing to turn on their video, that'd be awesome. But we can also just talk via audio. What do folks think about this question? It's kind of heavy, for sure.
I feel like communities that have been historically been treated as disposable are, low income communities and communities that are of color. Um, so I feel like those are the communities that are treated as disposable because they are communities that have high risk to chemicals in the environment and plastic landfill. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Apollino, you're on mute.
There you go. Okay. I grew up in this little city called Maywood, and we just had a huge Exide plant. They just left a plant here with a chemical drain and had to do a bunch of work here, and it just kind of got lost in the news for a while. So I just see it over and over with low income communities. And then when I look at the history of it, it's always also white. It's not just people of color. You go to Appalachia and other places in this country, and it's all connected to poverty. It's always a dumping ground to people that don't have the resources to speak up. So I'm hoping to learn more about how I can help more people speak up.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one of my friends who's a lawyer who goes to like a conference for environmental lawyers was sitting, and Range Resources, which is a fossil fuel company, was doing a presentation, and he was like, we try to avoid high income areas. And it was like a slip of the tongue, and that like he wasn't trying to say they target low income areas, but that's what he was saying by saying that they try to avoid high income areas that have a lot of resources to resist like whatever type of plant they're trying to put in there. I feel like it was just like very obvious moment.
Oh, I forgot to mention, how long do you want people to discuss in the breakout rooms before we bring them back to main session?
Let's come back at 12:20 or 2:25. Sorry, I guess it's 12:25. I don't know, 25.
Okay, yeah. It's 11:22, so I'll bring them back in 3 minutes.
Okay, you can like let everybody know too. Beth or Patricia, do you have any thoughts? Maybe not. I think I like to think about this question because it's like folks treat communities disposable, and that's also where they tend to put like waste infrastructure, but also production infrastructure, like really anywhere along the linear consumption economy, like where they're putting in things that are going to like poison or harm a community. It's like always ones that, I mean, it's like so clear that there's just like a disregard for those folks. Where's everybody calling in from?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Beth, hi.
I just wanted to say it's upsetting because I feel like the bargaining chip that is used is you will lose your livelihood if you don't allow this in your community, and that they try to garner support from people who are dying from these polluted waterways. And yeah, that's all I had to say.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like brought on as an economic opportunity, even though it's going to poison their family.
Exactly. It's just a conundrum, and I'm not sure what can be done to just eradicate these companies and get them out of these communities entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like thought, or I want to Apoliano. Am I saying your name right?
You can call me Polo.
Polo, were you going to say something?
Well, to me, one of the things that I learned about way too late was with the grape boycotts and a lot of Chicano movements in the late 70s and early 80s. And what they did is they did a lot of education within the communities that were being impacted. So they would be, and then they would go outside of those communities. So it would be doing a grape boycott where the people lived, or maybe who had some historical connection to working in the fields. And then doing things that really got a lot of attention about the cause. You know, they did it in a very creative way. They did a lot of humor. I think what I'm excited to see is I think young people have the best connection to getting things out there in the world that have a big visual impact and get a lot of attention to things. So to me, I'm trying to learn more and more about what was the most successful in the past that could be replicated. So, yeah. And even like in this community where I'm at right now, I just happen to be visiting my parents. People from here, there's toxicity everywhere. There's a city called City of Commerce that's within around our area. There's no one that lives in City of Commerce. It's literally just factories and chemicals and huge trucks passing by all the time. And not enough people that live here know about the environmental impact. And so I think just educating the communities that are being impacted, I think is the first thing. Just looking at what's worked historically, that might be like a good start.
Right. And like providing an alternative, you know, like I know way too many towns that are named after, like DuPont, like that's a town and it's named after company. What else was I thinking? Oh, I think like redefining how we think about waste can be a great like intervention point in general for like this idea of disposing of a community, or like not thinking about a community, but like if waste isn't a thing anymore, like maybe we won't be treating each other like it. So I always like to, you know, relate it to zero waste in some way.
I think, should I bring everyone in, or do you want to?
Yeah, that works. Everyone's gonna trickle in. All right, everyone's coming back in. And I don't think we're gonna do a share back, but definitely, you know, exchange information if you want to keep talking about that. I highly recommend Melissa Miles' keynote speech at the Students for Zero Waste conference on YouTube. Maybe I can drop a link to that. But I'm gonna share my screen again. Here we go. All right. All right. Tiara, you want to take this slide?
Right. So I was just talking about this in the breakout session. We have all probably been talking about disposable communities in the United States, but we can also put this into context where trash is being dumped again in other countries. So, for example, in Southeast Asia, we have started the take action on the piles of rubbish that's being dumped into our islands. So instead of them being added more to our landfills and us, we don't even have like these systems to actually manage trash in the first place. So everything just goes into landfill. But now with the added pressure from other countries bringing in trash from us, we've started shipping back trash into global north and saying, okay, we don't want this anymore. So it's great, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and so today we have both Tiara and I, and that's kind of like a global dynamic going on there for sure. Like we're on two opposite, literally 12 hours apart whenever we try to meet. And so when we're talking about this, we're thinking about local and global organizing. And so I wanted to go through a couple of the pros and cons of both of those, just so that we can have those in mind. Because global like dynamics cause things like the waste trade. So some pros of global, despite things like the waste trade, is that you can have really gradual changes, but they will be big. So something like the global brand audit is something that can happen that has like slowly made and Tiara, maybe you want to drop a link to the brand audit, slowly made companies like Pepsi and Coke accountable for the waste that they create. And it also allows me to have friends like Tiara, who is literally on the opposite side of the earth as me. Cons of it is that there's definitely colonialism at play. If we think about the way that even folks talk about developed versus undeveloped countries and what we consider developed to be, and the fact that there's even a hierarchy. And then additionally, there can be cross-cultural barriers in that our cultural norms are not the same. So when we're communicating, we may not be getting the same message that the person is trying to talk to us about. And so you'd think the opposite of global is localized organizing. So pros of this is that you can get small changes pretty fast. So like passing a local ordinance or eliminating plastic bags at your farmer's market can be something that can happen pretty quick. And it can build community with people that live around you. Cons of this is that it tends to get folks to think in the NIMBY aspect or perspective, which is not in my backyard. So that's what causes things like the global waste trade, right? Because as long as it's not affecting me, it's fine. So we're going to send it somewhere else. And then cons of that as well is that it limits what you're open, like what you learn and what you're open to. Like maybe there's a zero waste solution somewhere that you were never exposed to just because you're localized. And so with those pros and cons in mind, we're going to do one little engagement. This will be the only time I believe that you will be interacting with our slides, but I'm going to send this over and then I will explain. I want to make sure it's the right share settings. Okay, copy link. All right, so I'm going to send you a link to our presentation. That's to everyone. And so pop on in there and come down to where I am on slide 16, if you have access to that. And on this slide, I'm going to share my screen again. You'll see that I have little boxes that have space for you to put your name. And then you're going to click and drag this to where you think organizing should be, or movements in general. So if you're like, we should be local, like globalization, global organizing only has bad things happening. Or if you're like, listen, we need to talk to everybody and be in solidarity with everybody. You'd be way over here. So type in your name and just throw down where you think you'd be on this spectrum. You'll see that is the color spectrum that I pulled. And we'll give everyone like 30 seconds to go through that. All right. Usually I like to call on folks that are at more of the extreme sides of the spectrum, but so Dennis, do you want to talk about why you put yours more near local?
I actually like am not also the biggest fan of local either.
Uh-huh.
Because but I mean when I was in community college, I took like a sociology class, and I learned that, you know, as individuals, we have like not that much power. But as individuals acting in groups, um, we can build power. And I think like local is like the starting point. So, you know, where you are and connecting to people locally and talking about things like me being involved with Zero Waste Youth brought me to this space, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's super important for folks to get involved where they are. Although now with the internet, you know, and now even more with the pandemic and Zoom, there's more possibility to do more global stuff. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think Sophia's the farthest over on global, even though you're definitely near the middle. Do you want to talk at all about why you leaned towards global?
Sure, yeah. So I really think that the problems that we are facing, I mean, it's a global problem. So I think that almost every single country is affected by it, and especially like the smaller countries that are at a lower sea level will definitely be affected by it. So we definitely have to think about it as a global perspective, because like where you know, the people in the United States are causing so much harm to the world, but we're not considering the small islands that are probably going to be destroyed within a couple decades. So we really have to think about it globally. Also, like I really like the idea where in the pro and cons, the pro cons global local slide, you were talking about how maybe there's a problem that you're facing locally, but somebody else out there has already solved it and has like great ideas. So one of the great things I think about conversing globally is that you can exchange ideas that worked in your community and transfer it to another community that's facing a very similar problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, somebody ruined the surprise, which I think was Devin. So maybe I'm going to call you out, because our slide here is think globally, act locally. And Devin, you were right in the middle, and I saw that.
Sorry about that.
Do you want to explain?
Sure. I apologize for that. I do this with my students,
Yeah.
my environmentally concerned kids club, and the key with my students is they have all these global ideas and they get lost in these ideas, and then I'm trying to really encourage them that think globally, but then do citizen scientists or be citizen scientists and really act locally, like talking to their district board members, or talking to the city council, or talking to their colleagues or their classmates. So that's what so I apologize for ruining the surprise. I didn't mean to.
No, you didn't. I was just kidding around. And I'm really glad that you put it. And a really important thing in like why there was a spectrum here is that nobody is right or wrong, right? Like these things are hard to answer, and different scenarios are gonna have different answers. But this is a saying that I think really can resonate with a lot of people. Tiara, do you want to add anything? I know this was your slide, and Devin did a pretty good job.
Yeah, everyone has laid out the perfect points, and we do need to, act locally while we're thinking about the global movement, because we need to be coordinated in our efforts to actually be able to affect change in these really, really huge policymakers, corporations, etc.
Yeah, cool. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about a frontline community. And Tiara and I both identify as coming from frontline community. And a definition that we pulled here are directly impacted communities who have been able to collectively name the ways they are burdened and are organizing for action together. Identify more with a petrochemical frontline community and like being on the front lines of resisting that. Tiara, do you want to talk about what you feel is your front line?
Sure. Maybe we could go to the next slide, Young, just so everyone's clear. So Young was talking about being in the petrochemical part, frontline, which is in the extraction phase, and I mostly face a lot of the consumption effects and disposal parts of this life cycle. So we just need to think about what are our front lines, what are the communities near us, how are we most affected by this plastics life cycle.
Yeah, and I think that I'm gonna go back one slide. Here we go. And I think that a lot of folks are like, I really want to engage with frontline communities, but they don't necessarily realize where their frontline is. Like Tiara was saying, there's a lot of different ways that you can be impacted by plastic. And kind of a dead giveaway is one of the quotes that I put on here that I'm going to read. And it says, most of the adult negotiators will frankly not live long enough to suffer the impacts from bad policy. But young people will still be around to deal with the consequences of bad policy. And so if you can't think of a single way that you're impacted by waste or the plastic life cycle, and if somehow you live on an island in paradise, but you are here because you're a zero waste youth, you're still on the front line because you're going to have to deal with climate change and this world. And we did have an activity that I think we should skip because we don't have as much time, but I would encourage you to visit this prompt on your own when you leave this session or later today, and keep this this linear consumption economy in mind when you're doing this journal activity. But the question is just, where is your front line? And there's so many different ways that it can be there. I saw one time somebody talked about their brother being deployed overseas in America, and how that's primarily because America's like trying to take everyone's oil, right? So like and oil is used to make plastic. So there's like convoluted ways that you can be related. So I encourage you to journal about this. Tiara, do you want to intro this?
Sure. We thought about adding in this breakout session about organizing in the time of COVID-19. So a lot of us are, again, very tired of Zoom, and we appreciate you all being here despite not being required in school. So we wanted to talk about the ways that your organizing has improved or has not improved in the time of COVID-19. Like, what have been the challenges since the pandemic started in terms of organizing? How was your momentum as an individual working in a movement or an organization changed? And we just love to see like how people respond. What are your thoughts on this, and how we could move forward after that?
Yeah, and maybe to save time, we can stay in this group. I know 25 is a lot of people, but we'd love for like one or two people to talk about like, right, there's good and bad sides of this. But I'd love to hear from all of you, like your thoughts on how it's changed, both good and bad.
So I can talk a little bit. So I live in New York City, and I used to be able to walk 2 blocks away to compost, and they used to have like these open, drop off stations. But because of COVID, they had to shut all those down across the city. And so I've been packing compost in my fridge for like months. And so finally they opened like this, I don't know who they is, but like some bicycle powered compost people opened a compost place like 13 blocks away. So I would have to walk 13 blocks like every month or so to dump all of my compost. I know it's like a little like, first world problem where I have to like walk more to like dump my compost. But it was really scary, like having all this compost in my fridge and not knowing when it would leave. And then also I want to mention, like, I had to move apartments because of my psychotic roommate. And I guess when people move apartments, you just realize you have so much stuff in your room. And so I just learned very, very recently about Buy Nothing group. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but there's a Buy Nothing network on Facebook where you can just like say, I have all this crap that I need to get rid of, come and pick it up. And, you know, you can always arrange like contactless pickups that, you know, just leave it outside your door and then text me when you come so I can leave it outside my door, stuff like that. So I got rid of so much stuff and not having, like, diverting it from the landfill. So even through even though it's COVID-19, we're not allowed to like interact with people, I still was able to get rid of a lot of stuff contactlessly.
That's awesome. Anyone else? Anyone have a pro of, I guess finding Buy Nothing is definitely a pro. But anyone have another like good thing that's happened?
I'm just trying to get more vocal when I see it with family members. It's kind of like maybe before I came out and then just telling people who I was. And now it's, you know, being at my sister's and seeing how much, you know, paper plates she uses and just being more vocal, like around the table, just immediately, you know, just, yeah, I don't know, just speaking up in every chance I get. I think that's all I feel that I can start with that. I can start with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the I think interesting good things that has happened recently, I was in a disability justice training, and the amount of events that folks that don't have the same mobility as a lot of us have been able to go to has increased like so much. So a lot of people are like, I've never been able to go to like an event like this, and now I can because they're making a virtual option. So I think it's like a really great opportunity for us to like rethink the way we're doing organizing, and including folks that have disabilities or disabled people. Next slide, though. This is just a fun graphic. I know that disposable masks have become a pretty big thing and they end up all over the streets and stuff. I don't really have anything to add to this though. Tiara, did you want to add anything? It's just kind of a fun graphic.
Yeah, we actually just popped this in here to make everyone think about their life choices. Just kidding. But it was so fun to hear about everyone's sharings and how you guys reflect on your role in this COVID-19 world, and also how we relate to that in the life cycle part of plastics and how we relate to that in terms of campaigning. So we wanted to have that conversation with you guys just to give you a sense of why we're doing this and what are the things we had to understand when we had the campaign. Who are the people actually affected? How does this relate to us personally? So we will all have our own journeys and how we will continue striving with our passions to fight for the environment. But yeah, it's I know.
Yeah, it's
young.
early late for you, Tiara. And I wanted to leave with a couple resources. So these are all hyperlinked, and since I sent the presentation, you should have access to it. And then Dennis probably also has access. So I think I'm going to drop the keynote by Melissa Miles about disposable communities in the presentation so that you can come back to it. But there's a couple different resources here that are really great that can help you like move forward during COVID. I know that like zero waste during COVID seems like the last thing that we all should be doing. But I think that like the way mutual aid has popped up and the way everybody is like reconsidering how they use resources is like so tied to zero waste. And we just like really need to redefine what zero waste means so that people do understand mutual aid is zero waste, right? It's getting rid of something that you don't need and giving it to somebody who does need it. And so, you know, that's kind of just the end of this, is that we get that COVID is a tough time to be organizing. And I think that's everything we have. We have our emails there, but we can also take probably like one question if somebody has an urgent question, but otherwise we are at our time.
Does anyone have questions they'd like to chime in about?
I guess I have a question about what is the most effective tactic you think you've seen with dealing with, you said that you worked with the very beginning of the life cycle. So what do you think is the most effective, or one of some of the most effective tactics dealing with being a frontline community there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I talked about this yesterday, like dealing with somebody who doesn't want to like resist the same thing. And I think public health is a great thing to come back to. Cracker plants are so bad. If you've heard of Cancer Alley, which recently renamed itself Death Alley in Louisiana, that is a row of petrochemical plants. Like they are absolutely causing cancer. And just like making it clear to folks that like if we let this actually happen, like it's not going to be good for you personally. And like the actual job numbers of it like doesn't really make sense either. Like the amount of jobs that actually takes to do this type of technology is like nothing. But I think public health is something that I come back to a lot.
Okay, so reframing, that's really great, thanks.
I agree. We always use public health as a frame for people who are very resistant to ditching plastics. We also like to screen the story of plastic a lot, just because it summarizes everything in one documentary. And you can organize, just as a plug, you can organize your own screenings in your community or even your house by going to storyofplastic.org. I'll drop that in the presentation.
Also, feel free to email either of us whenever. Happy to hop on a Zoom one-on-one.
Other questions? All right, everyone. I want to thank Young and Tiara so much for joining us. Yay. Round of applause. And thank you both so much. And I hope everybody, I hope, you know, you got some sleep, Tiara. Sorry.
No problem.
And yeah, thank you again, Young. This is a really great presentation, very informative. I'd never considered like myself, like what frontline community I'm part of. And I'm like, oh, I'm in the production and distribution phase in like Southeast LA where I grew up. So yeah, super important. All right, y'all.
Thanks,
Well,
everyone.
we'll see you at the lunch session. So if you can go back to your email and then you'll see the link. So yeah, see you there. Bye.
I'm gonna close it.
Okay.